So I have a warm spot for Newark in my heart. My family's been involved there for over 100 years. My grandfather was raised there, and my father was raised there. I was born in Newark, Beth Israel, and raised there for a while. So I've done a lot of work there, probably over my last 20-year career. So why is Newark such a great area for office? And I think that 50 years ago it was established as a major center of commerce. If you look at some of the history of some of the office tenants, you had insurance, banking, law. There was a lot of industrial manufacturing that also supported the office with you had Port Newark, and you had, I guess, with the old Newark Airport, now Newark Liberty International Airport. Some of the major space users over the years, as you probably remember, were Prudential, the old Bell Atlantic, what used to be First Fidelity, Mutual Benefit Life, Firemen's Funds, the now Blue Cross Blue Shield, New Jersey Transit, PSE&G, both have had their headquarters there for years, and other local and national law firms, not to mention all the higher institutions, Rutgers, Seton Hall, UMD&J, Essex County Community College, and NJIT, all major space users. But now the landscapes have changed a little bit. You still have IDT in a different format. They've moved out of their building. They're now at 550 Broad. Audible's a major space user on Washington. Prudential continues to be a major space user. We'll talk about their potential consolidation in a second. Obviously, the great news about Panasonic. Standard Chartered Bank is there. I don't know if you knew that. The federal court system, Bank of America, Xerox, which was used to be called ACS, all major space users, and they continue to grow. And some of the office product has been taken off the market through adaptive reuse, which helps with the absorption. 1180 Raymond was converted by Cogswell to housing, and I believe the former Rutgers Library is going to be student housing at some point too. So that, that's all good news for guys in my business. We're going to be able to jack up the rents at some point. Lanier, I want to talk about market stats because Lanier mentioned that we're half the price of Midtown Manhattan. Actually, that's incorrect. Midtown Manhattan, the cheap space is $60 a square foot, and you can run up to $120 a square foot in places like the Exxon building, $180 a square foot. 9 West 57, $210 a square foot. So our most expensive space is $30 a square foot. And we also compete with them because we have things like the BEEP, GROW, UEZ, and all those great incentive programs. Let me spend a moment on market stats. And I don't know how much of you spent time in Newark and know these things, but I'll throw out a couple stats for you. The overall office market in Newark is about 13.5 million square feet. The Class A office market, which is I predominantly work in, is about 6.5 million. There are only 12 Class A buildings versus 57 overall. The average asking rent, as I mentioned before, is about $30 a square foot for Class A versus low to mid-20s. And that's debatable because we look at net effective rents, as you guys do too. The overall space in Class A office is about 600,000 versus almost 2.5 million in the overall market. Vacancy rates, they're going up. They're 9.5% for Class A and about 17.5% for overall. And year-to-date leasing activity is actually down versus last year, but we're only in the first quarter. And net absorption is also down. We have negative absorption versus the positive of last year. However, vacancy is going up and pricing is going up. And that's kind of indicative of the fact that Class A office space in Newark is coveted. Right now, it was about 3% last year for Gateway. It's up to 6% because another larger block came on. But in the entire complex, I think there's about 150,000 square feet, which bodes pretty well. It's been a bunch of new major developments, which Lanier mentioned. I think that all supports the office. I think that what's happening is Newark's going to become a real live-work community. It kind of reminds me of White Plains, what it used to be. They had hundreds of thousands of workers that would flee at 5 o'clock. And what Capelli and Trump and a lot of other developers have done is come in and built these massive residential high-rises and clusters of mid-story complexes like Ron's trying to do. And it's brought back the life to the downtown core. And from my perspective, 30,000 feet up, what Lanier's doing is unbelievable in his group and the mayor and the city council, because that's where this thing is going. The years of the Minneapolis-style office complex like Gateway, where you're keeping the people in tubes into the center, into the transportation hub and getting them out of the city is over. I think that what everybody is trying to do now is it's to try to get people back on the street and creating the streetscape and getting the retail going again. And between the new streetscapes on Broad Street, North Newark, and the Central Ward, it's all starting to come together. It's not going to happen overnight, but I could tell you at least 4 or 5 million square feet of office space on the waterfront. And for years, all you saw was cranes, and there's no cranes there. But if you come to Newark, there are cranes all over the place. There's construction areas, and yeah, it's not very accommodating when you're trying to get around. Certainly, when you want to get to hobbies, as I mentioned to Ron the other day. But it's very exciting. I think the amount of investment that's going into Newark is only going to bode better for the office market. It's been a bunch of major transactions I'm sure that everybody knows about, but Panasonic was probably the leader for a Japanese company headquartered in Secaucus and over 1 million square feet to decide to move to a urban center like Newark is unbelievable. Guys in my business sat back and said, that's never going to happen. They're never going to Newark. And between SJP Properties and Matrix Development and the help of the state and the Urban Transit Tax Up Credit, these guys pulled it off. And that was a site that was sitting around since Fleet Bank was owning the site, stubbed in steel above the garage. And everybody sat around, when's it going to happen? Banks were looking at it. It just never happened. And Panasonic came in, and just to understand how robust some of these development credits are, a building like that anywhere with the structured parking, even though that was there, but with the steel, that building you would probably need, if you built that in the waterfront, probably in the mid-40s to upper 40s. They're going to end up paying about $10 a square foot after all the tax credits. So that was a major incentive, and this is a program that's really designed for a new office user in Newark along the waterfront. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. I think that people are going to continue to cluster around the transportation hubs. I do a lot of work out in the suburbs too, and what the trends are now is people want efficiency. People want to be able to pack and stack people in an office building. The days of 200, 300 square foot corner offices are over. Bloomberg, as you probably know, has adopted an open floor plan model. There are really no offices with the exception of teaming rooms. And so the days of 4 cars per thousand in a standard office building can't accommodate the density nowadays. So either people are going to have to build parking structures or build new office buildings with higher parking ratios, or they're going to cluster down to urban areas where there are transportation hubs. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing in Newark. Specifically the waterfront, there's never been a migration of people from the west coming to the east. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing people move out of Bernardsville, Somerset, Bridgewater, Bergen County with Mellon Bank at one point. So they're just not all coming from the east. And I think you're going to continue to see that. I think you're going to see people who fled out the 280 corridor come back. The Prudential site is not one that I'm involved in, but I'll give you my perspective. I think that for the gateway owners, they're nervous, and that's why the lawsuits are out there. I think that they are concerned of having the ability to replace their tenants at that levels that they currently have in the buildings. And quite frankly, that's going to be a real problem for them at the end of the day. Because I mentioned before, the office market is about 25% that of Manhattan. Most likely, the new tenants that are going to be coming from there will probably be migrating west to east, and maybe from downtown over Jersey City out. Maybe people from like Standard Chartered Bank coming up from Princeton wanting to be equidistant. But they're going to $30 square foot rents. They're going to have to carry those buildings if Pru moves out. And they're going to probably have to go through what we call a basis reset, where the banks are going to have to renegotiate and try to lower the debt ratios. I'm involved in a transaction out at 744 Broad. It was unfortunately kind of a pre-packaged bankruptcy with Cogswell, Bank of America as the lead bank. And that building will trade at about $50 a square foot. So buying a building like 744 with all the infrastructure improvements in it at $50 a square foot, you can make a lot of mistakes and not get hurt. And so they'll probably end up pricing that in the low 20s. And even though that's not a modern glass and steel building like Gateway, it's $30 a square foot. They're in the low 20s, and they're going to have a real hard time competing with 744. Plus, the older product along North Broad, we're in the low 20s. I think that those people will be attracted to 744 Broad to get back into where Main and Main is. But anyway, the Prudential site's going to, as everybody knows, is hopefully going to be going along Broad Street. across from Military Park. 650,000 square feet with about 1,600 car parking. That's going to completely gentrify that whole area, everything from, I think, Raymond Boulevard over to Central Avenue. Once again, creating these clusters. So I think they're going to keep their old headquarters and they'll relocate a bunch of people to the new headquarters. That's just going to take that whole area to a whole nother level. I think you're going to see street retail again come back in a much bigger way than it has in the past. And once again, they're doing that deal because it's the urban transit tax upgrade. I think they got $250 million from the state. Other major transactions last year, Epstein Becker came off of a sublease. They took 40,000 square feet coming out of 2 Gateway. They went to 1 Newark Center, major New York law firm. One major sale last year happened, Gateway Center 4, about 330,000 square feet. That building traded to David Warner Associates for $81 million, or I think it was about $247 million, $247 a square foot. That's a pretty high price. And trying to refill that tenancy. The good news for them is their major tenants, McCarter English, and they're going to be there for a long time. I think it's about another 15 years. Distressed transactions. 1180 Raymond was a conversion that was taken off the market. Cogswell did do the conversion. He was successful at the beginning, but then he kind of turned his tenancy around to. I think he's feeding into the Seton Hall market now. They're really the only game in town for housing for the Seton Hall law students. And he's doing very well. He's over 90-some-odd% occupied. I understand KBS out of California bought that note. They're in the process of foreclosing. And as I mentioned before, 744 Broad, another distressed sale. Bank of America selling it to a foreign investor. So what are the demand drivers? All the work that Lanier's been doing in the state. I think that the fact that it has probably one of the most robust transportation networks in the state of New Jersey. You can really get everywhere, and not only public transportation, vehicular. You've got 280, the Turnpike, 1 and 9, 78. They all feed in very nicely with the improvements they've done to McCarter Highway. It's very easy to get in and out. As it relates to the waterfront, it's a much lower cost. There's a 6 to 8% vacancy factor Class A office space. It depends on who you ask. In Jersey City, and those rents are over close to $40 a square foot. So this is a very compelling competitive marketplace. I mentioned the desuburbanization of New Jersey because of the parking ratios and the density. That's another great driver. Employees want to, if they're going to be in an open environment, they want to be able to commute. They want LEED certified buildings. They want clean air. They want to ride their bicycles. So I think that's going to bode well as the residential continues to pop up. People continue to live, work in the city. And I think you've got to look at the footprint of the higher education. They continue to grow. If you have the opportunity to go to 744 Broad, where I spent a lot of time on the 31st floor of that building, you have a great panoramic view of the city. And you could just see everything going west is all higher education. And it really just stops at Halsey. And there's no reason why I should just jump over one more street and continue to absorb space along Broad Street. I was involved in the sale of One Washington to Fidelco years ago, and I was always wondering why Mark was buying the building, having no idea that he had Rutgers in his pocket and was going to come to that building and sell him half of it. It was ingenious. It's going to completely redevelop that whole Orange Street area up near the Newark Bear Stadium. And so I think that's going to continue. I think that's going to continue further east. I think it's going to come from the north going to the south down to Teachers Village. And I think that in 15 years, I don't know if the 2025 plan will be done, according to Ron, but I think that you're going to see a lot more steel and glass towers. I think you're going to see buildings like the Haynes building redeveloped and others of these other buildings that have been lying fallow for years. I think that it's a great opportunity. There's money out there for it. I think the urban transit tax up credit, grow, deep, the fact that it's a UEZ area. Newark is on the rise again.